Welcome to Off Planet Radio. My guest for this show is what I will just call a most unusual man with unusual views. Views based on information that has been suppressed at the highest levels of government, science, and religion. Hidden in plain sight and documented by NASA's own satellite photos that were later altered for the public consumption, and documented in the book The Ringmakers of Saturn by Dr. Norman Bergrun, a former research scientist at the Ames Research Center and a member of the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. The evidence we're going to talk about is found in the unaltered photos from the Cassini Satellite Explorer, and it is expanded on by my guest as the strange images found in the corona of the sun. EMVs, Electromagnetic Vehicles, intelligent guardians of the solar system and the galaxy. All of this we are going to unravel in this next hour of Off Planet Radio. I'm Randy Maugans. The website is offplanetradio.com, and my guest is James Horak. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Randy. I'm very pleased to be here.
Before we begin, the website for all of this, and there's a lot of information there. Take some time and thread through it and proof it for yourself. EMVsinfo.blogspot.com. Go there and support the website and let the folks who are working together with James know that you appreciate what they're doing, because they're putting out information in a way that I not only think is extremely informative but actually very artful in its rendering. It's a beautiful website that Tours has put together, and there's videos there. There's tons of articles, literally a website that you can just kind of sit down and consume information and possibly even interact with people who are like-minded. James, maybe where we can begin in this conversation, because we're going to unfold in the course of this show kind of what I'm going to call, and you can correct me on this, sort of a cosmology that I don't think most people are quite familiar with. But maybe give us a little bit of background about your past, your interaction with what I guess I will call off-planet beings, and your connection to the EMVs.
Starting from the time I was 4 years old onward, I had a number of experiences that I can only say at the time seemed bizarre to me and disconnected, but over a period of time, the course of events in my life have led me down a path that has led to my realizing the point in all of it, and also paralleling it with a number of other people that have had similar experiences and ended up serving a good for mankind on this planet that was alternative to the way things are going in the scheme of globalism at present.
You and I have talked a little bit about suppressed science and about the fact that really our understanding of just about everything in our physical universe has been suppressed, warped, and twisted by the establishment of science. How did you come to that realization, and what is your insight into humanity's grasp of the nature of our own physical being?
The first realization I had of that I was thrust into when I was 4 years old. My mother, myself, her cousin, and her brother were on the way to Texas from New Mexico, and a situation occurred where I actually saw EBEs, and I saw the way in which the military operates in order to keep acknowledgement of their presence and possible purposes they were serving even then quiet. And it was something, even at that age, I remember vividly today, and it set the tone for what was to come next. And it wasn't but a scant 2 years later, there was an attempt made on my life. And from then on, things just became more interesting and developed along those lines, even to the point of when I went into the Navy. It followed me there. It followed me out of the Navy. It followed me throughout my life. I wasn't able to put what I know now together until I had an experience in Utah. And that is when I became aware of what my role in this was, what it had been before, and my lineage.
Maybe here at this point, we'll begin explaining a little bit of this. You just used the term EBEs, and I'd like you to explain that because it plays into, I think, what we have to consider a redefinition in the investigation of ufology, because most people are not familiar with the term and have used the wider application of ETs, extraterrestrials, as a catch-all for any off-planet enemy. So briefly explain EBEs and what that means and why you have made that distinction.
EBEs is a designation that the Air Force had given extra biological entities that most people call grays today. And that was to be distinguished between ETs that at the same time, 1972, they gave a different nomenclature. The EBEs are not sentient. They are a type of android with a terminal, a computer terminal, period. The ETs are sentient humanoids, usually, and are extraterrestrial. They have the same complement that we have. They're from advanced civilizations, and they're organized into an extended community. They are peaceful. They have no hostility. They will not be hostile towards mankind on this planet. And the EBEs are problematic, and the subject of their being problematic has been brought up to one of our world leaders, former President Eisenhower.
Now, and again, this confirms for the listeners some of the information that came out in the series of shows that we did with Nigel Kerner, who did a pair of books on the gray aliens. And in those shows, Nigel and I agreed, based on his research and my own experiences, that the grays were non-sentient, that they were basically a computerized form of an artificial life, and that they had that they were cold. Basically, these were cold beings. So that's interesting how your information, James, dovetails into what some other people have researched from a distance. What do you believe to be the origin of the EBEs?
The EBEs were created by a highly advanced civilization for deep space exploration. This civilization was too advanced and too humane to send its own people out amongst the stars where they would never see their loved ones again. So they created EBEs. And the EBE is designed for two things: for efficient means of travel and for the retrieving of information or data on what is found and sending it back. After a period of time, this civilization aspired to a higher manifestation called spiritual technology, which sometimes happens. And the EBEs, a contingent of them, became purposeless. And over thousands of years, they began to receive radio signals from other civilizations and to seemingly vary into an aberrant form and become problematic. They seem to have become obsessed with speciating. They are designed not to be able to do that. They have no genetic number. But that may account for some of the early abductions where they experimented on people. In the last 25 or 30 years, I don't think there have been any abductions related to that sort of thing. I think that by and large, the vast majority of these abductions are done by black ops, covert black ops for various reasons.
Right, mill lab abductions.
Yes, yes.
That makes a great deal of sense. So you think there was a definite bracket of time where the abductions were occurring, where they were actually abducting human specimens for the purpose of harvesting genetic material, attempting to assimilate into a sentient life form?
I think that may have had something to do with it. I think when there was an attempt on my mother and myself and her brother and her cousin, I think that was right on the borderline of that, because the military had established a presence in that area, I would say, fairly quickly. I was only 4 years old, and I don't have a perspective to give you how much time lapsed from one event to another during that. But I can simply say that what they did to me and what they probably did to the others was routine.
Okay.
And that was military medical people, probably doctors and nurses.
You have mentioned to me in previous conversations a little bit about the background to the Greater Treaty, the alleged meeting of ETs with the government around the time of the Eisenhower administration. Can you give us a little bit of background on that, maybe?
Well, I had known something about that from ETs, but never said anything. I only knew it secondhand. But when McElroy came forward and gave a statement that he had been a member of a committee that had access to the brief and that described the meeting between Eisenhower and ETs,
Mm-hmm.
and that the sole purpose the ETs had in participating in that meeting was to offer to get rid of the EBEs, specifying that they were problematic, and that the military thought they were going to get all this technology from the EBEs, and cautioned Eisenhower and advised him not to, since the ETs would not give anybody any technology, which they're forbidden to do, and the EBEs would, which has never done us any good, only harmed us,
Mm-hmm.
then they wouldn't agree to it. You know, the day will come that everyone on this planet will wish to God that President Eisenhower consented to have the EBEs removed.
So we're at a place right now where many people were talking about disclosure. Well, let's just talk about this for a minute, James. The media onslaught that's ongoing right now in framing the ETs in, I guess, what you would consider to be a malevolent view, and the slant that's being given across the board with films and TV series on, again, invasions of the planet. We seem to be positioned right now for some sort of situation that will attempt to present us with an alien invasion type scenario.
I caution everyone to think for themselves in this. Use their common sense. It makes absolutely no sense in any terms whatsoever that they would wait until we had more and more means of resistance or countering whatever hostility we may perceive or we may conjecture that they might represent, until we had made a garbage dump out of our planet before they would enact any kind of enterprise against us. It's just absurd. It's ridiculous. We know that they have been around for a long time. And why should we, as a peoples, why should we believe these people when they've lied to us all these many years? They have killed, they have ruined people's lives by the thousands to keep a secret, only so that when they were ready to use it to take over the world under a feudal political system, to drive us to bite bullets, to accept a reduction in our standard of living and in our personal freedoms. Why would we believe these liars? And this is such an absurd contention. It is insane. I mean, look at the SOHO images of the sun. Almost any day you will see craft of planetary size. You'll see them in the corona of the sun. This represents the ability to destroy this planet in seconds. I mean, people, just use your heads. It makes no sense, and I assure you, there is no hostile ET presence, none at all. If anything, they're well-wishing. They have stayed back. They have restrained from any hostility towards anyone. And the EBEs, on the other hand, are useful to the military and to the government conspirators to represent an illusion of hostility on behalf of the extraterrestrials. There is no hostility from them.
James, do you believe that the ETs, the ones who are out there, do you believe that they are constrained by a code, by some sort of moral or spiritual code, from interfering with us, but at the same time, in a sense, cooperating with us in our best efforts to, I guess we would say, ascend into a society that goes beyond this present evil system? Is that kind of a fair picture?
Yes, absolutely. And it's both as a matter of protocol, and both it's a matter of moral core. It's also a matter of spiritual awareness. These people, they differ from civilization to civilization, but they are uniform in a contractual agreement that they honor within an extended community. And there are literally thousands of systems involved in this. There are tens of thousands of separate civilizations, and they are as one with respect to their intentions, to respect to their code of conduct, their protocols, and I can speak for all of them on this.
It's interesting you bring that up because, again, a lot of what I do, I'm an investigative reporter. I kind of tend to put my own feelings and opinions aside a lot of times, but what you just said kind of confirms some of the things that Bob Dean told me in an interview last winter, that he had in fact been on board a craft, had been taken off planet, and had witnessed a civilization and a people who he said were just simply light years beyond anything we can imagine in terms of the people themselves, their spiritual development, and the development of their culture and their technology. So I find that interesting that you also confirm that.
Well, it's the only logical conclusion you can form from a people that can survive their own technology, have star travel, be in agreement with others that have done the same. To be able to do that, to survive your own technology, you have to put aside the corrupt systems that breed war, that breed greed, that breed the kind of malicious manipulation that we see going on this planet. And most of all, that permit the majority of people to have the stress of day-to-day existence, not knowing where they're going to sleep, not knowing for sure what they're going to eat, when there's plenty for everyone. If it's equitably arranged to be distributed and to be provided, and proud people want work, proud people want to be occupied, they want to learn. Life is a journey, and they wish to take it on equal terms, and everyone has a right to that. In off-Earth communities, all of these things can be taken for granted. And I want the people of Earth to understand that that's what they deserve. And the only reason that they don't have it is because of the corrupt systems of your very own people being so elitist, so cocksure that they're better than everyone else, and that they can justify taking so much more of the resources, of the wealth for themselves, when they really have no other reason to possess than to exercise power over others. And that's just not right.
Yeah, I find it incredible. I think many of us, those of us, people that you are connected with, some people I'm connected with as well, I think we have a different view of life. In a sense, a lot of times I think it's a form of, it's almost like a spiritually distinct breed that exists on the planet. I look at this world and I see unlimited potential. I see unlimited energy. I think Nikola Tesla proved that early in the 20th century. I see no need for starvation, no need for sickness or disease. It seems like we live right now in a slave colony that was formed around our minds. And I find it unbelievable that here, going into the second decade of the 21st century, we're still fundamentally grappling with survival level instincts on this planet.
That's a prosaic way of saying it, and I agree completely. We have come to a point in time where the powers that be, that have been driven by one conspiracy against the masses after another, have painted themselves into the corner. The lies and delusions that they have participated in creating and foisting on the rest of us are no longer credible. And their manner and exercise in doing this is so blatantly obvious that their mass media has become a laughingstock. Politicians that work for them have become known felons or known pedophiles or known corrupt individuals who deal with the organized crime element of other nations. So what we have here today is where they would like for us not to have firm moral beliefs, where they would like for us not to have values that greatly ascend theirs. what they've actually done is cost all credibility in their organs of propaganda grinding, agenda grinding, and just how they do day-to-day business. And I think one of the most telling aspects of that is when our president gave away such a vast amount of money to save big business any inconvenience. And other people were looking for jobs. The masses of the people were looking for jobs and how to keep putting food on the table for their children.
Do you think at this present point in time, James, that they cannot any longer stop what I think you and I would view as, just to give it a term, an evolutionary process, the awakening of humanity to a higher destiny, that they can't stop this, and that in fact there is now an awakening going on, and they're actually terrified by this process?
I hope they are. I hope they are. It's not too late to come to an arrangement to stave off the bloodshed and the conflict and the devastation that will occur with any kind of violent revolution. They don't give much choice, but the people that are their captains and lieutenants by now assuredly have seen the kind of world this is going to lead to. And maybe they're asking themselves whether they want to participate or not. There are some I know that don't. And there are factions within this beast who are becoming more and more disenchanted. There are even secret societies that no longer are satisfied. Well, we weren't able to do it by the promised year 2000, but now we'll do it. We'll get it done by 2004. Oh, well, that didn't work. 2008. Now it's 2012. And maybe we'll get it done this time because everybody from all these little sects and all these little superstitious beliefs have forecasted 2012. So we have that as a motor vehicle. We can appeal to the fundamentalists who believe in, and I hate to say this because there are many good-hearted people that are fundamentalist in their beliefs religiously, but they're easy marks because they'll play these prophecies to the hilt with the feeling that as things get worse and worse, these people put their hands in their pockets and sit on them, waiting to be delivered by the second coming or whatever, and they'll be eaten alive. And this is what I see happening right now. They're going to be playing. There are three religions that have something similar to that. That's what they're playing to.
Yes, Judaism, Islam, and fundamentalist Christianity. All fundamentalist sects of those religions. Yes,
and they're looking for a completion. Whether they call it the seals, whether they call it revelations, whether they call it Nostradamus. But you see, if we didn't have choices, if we didn't have free will, then you could point to fate and say this is destiny. But we have free will, we have choices to change these things. And we're standing right now on the threshold of will enough of us decide to do that, or will we have people allow themselves to be ruled to the bitter end to serving the interests of someone else rather than themselves?
Do you think there's a critical mass in terms of the number of people that are required to move this planet? I think the number is very small. I've always thought that. And your sense of where we're at in that, because on one level, even as the fatalism ramps up, as we move towards 2012, and you see the drum beats of war that are being constantly sounded in the Middle East, in Africa, in the Far East, and all over the globe right now, I'm seeing kind of concurrent with that, a smaller group of people who have woken up. And it appears as though, I guess you would say, they just woke up and they're really pissed off. Are you getting a sense for that as well?
On both scores. On the score of how many people does it take to change things, it's very small.
Yes.
If they observe clarity, if they observe the moral determination to do it, as the ball got rolling, more and more people would fall in line because they would have the answers to what ails this planet spiritually and morally. In fact, when you're righteous, morality is spirituality. And as people come to see that, as people come to see that they are sitting among sterile religious leadership when they do not speak out against these wars of aggression, when they treat Zionism like it's hands off because we got to wait for Solomon's temple to be built, and we got to protect Israel no matter what they do, no matter how many Warsaw ghettos they have in Gaza. They've lost it. They're neither righteous nor are they devoutly religious. They're opportunists, just another kind of opportunist, where they're justifying the means by the ends, and that is ungodly in anybody's book.
Yes. Wolves in sheep's clothing. Now we're going to talk about the most fascinating aspect of this, which is EMVs, Electromagnetic Vehicles. And I mentioned at the top of the show the work of Dr. Norman Bergrun, and unfortunately I went to try and find this book, which is The Ringmakers of Saturn, and I was shocked to find out that for $1,200 I could actually get a copy of this, which was kind of discouraging from my standpoint because I'd love to read the book, but apparently it's quite out of print. You maybe give me a little bit of background, if you could, on Dr. Bergrun, what you understand about his work, and how it dovetails as well into your own understanding about the Ringmakers of Saturn and these vehicles that we now have eyes to see in the corona of the sun.
Dr. Bergrun was working in the early 80s for Ames and had access to raw data, and was very interested in what he was finding, as had been identified before by astrophysicists as migrating moons or mysterious moons. Different names are given to them in the rings of Saturn. And Dr. Bergrun began investigating a little more closely and even resorted to looking at these images under a microscope. And what he found became very, very revelatory, because they weren't just moving around into the rings, they were organizing and even completing, when he first started, the A ring. And it was about 5/6 complete when he first saw it. And he found these EMVs, cylindrical EMVs, at the terminus of the A ring, at the two termini. And he could see that over a period of time that the completion of that ring was gaining. And by the time that he published his book in 1986, it had been completed. Now, there are people that just now that are well known that are talking about, yeah, well, they were mining the rings and whatever. It's more intricate than that. If they were mining, they wouldn't have been completing the A ring. So there's more to it than that. And one time I was discussing this with Dr. Bergrun, what I thought, and he said, "How do you know this? How do you know this?" And I was put in an uncomfortable position, but I told him. And of course, that went beyond what he found credible, because he is a scientist, a very good one, very honest man, very open, and very courageous. And so that was more than he could buy. So he sort of ended our direct working together, and I continued to deal with an associate of his at the time, Casey Dukas. We were quite friendly. She had helped him on a number of occasions and had gone with him when he had gone to UFO conferences and so forth. So she and I continued to talk, and Dr. Bergrun's always had my support. I've never had a negative thing to say about the man. I have wrote a blurb for his book, which you can find on the webpage where he talks about the book, and I compare him to Galileo and Copernicus, and that is not an overstatement, or that's not an exaggeration. As far as I'm concerned, he's done more. And I wanted to discuss, I don't know if I did or not, while I was conversing with him, I don't know if I discussed that he should look in the sun, but I had discussed it with a group of amateur astronomers who were following H.A.A.R.P. And I told them when H.A.A.R.P. comes through the solar system the second time on its way out, you'll go by the sun, watch the sun closely. And they did, and they spied the EMVs. And they said, how do you know that? And I said, because they were hitching a ride on H.A.A.R.P. They said, was that the double nucleation? I said, yeah. They said, how do you know that? And I just said, dreams. Well, they didn't like that, but they spotted it, and they started watching the EMVs closely, and they were sure that they were reacting with the solar storms and the flares. And if I hadn't ruined my credibility with them, I would have explained their forming energy, which got a number of reasons. One is that they require energy, but they reciprocate energy. They keep the sun more stable for a number of ways, and they keep the CMEs from developing and aiming at the planets in the system harmfully, because a CME can devastate a planet. One CME can. And the design of our solar system, all of the things that it takes to provide a nursery for life and the lineage to sustain sentient life, which is comparatively delicate, is part of the design. And we were an intrusion to this system. And we came here because our system had been destroyed.
You
and
say we, you mean humanity?
Yes, our ancestors.
So we were basically transported here?
Well, we came in the moon, with the moon.
Okay.
We were on it and inside it, and it brought us here. And when we came to this system, at that time, the most viable planet to be established on was Mars. And the moon was put around Mars, and it was too large for Mars. It's too large for Earth, and because of that, it creates problems. And we have a varying gravity wave on Earth. That's why we can't hold a helium. And there are constant adjustments to maintain the parity required between the distance of the Earth and the moon to keep it in an orbit. Otherwise, it'd go out too far or come in. So that's going on all the time. And there are magnetic anomaly on the moon, there's magnetic anomaly on the Earth because of it. There was an advanced civilization living underneath the surface of Mars that helped us and gave us the means to do this. We were advanced, but not that advanced. And so they were about to manifest as spiritual technology, which is another thing entirely. And so they didn't mind helping us out and sharing Mars with us until we screwed that up. But now we're screwing Earth up.
Explain a little bit about the EMVs in terms of what they are, not only just in terms of their function, which, based on what you just told me, seems to be a balancing of energy exchanges within the solar system and a continuing equilibrium of forces, magnetic and electrical. Is that a fair summary?
Pretty much. And they produce a series of complex minerals in a form that's assimilable by tissue to start life on planets. And the rock that they put around Saturn and Jupiter are part of that. They have been preparing Jupiter now for about 250 years, which to them is, time means nothing to them.
Right.
They can compress time, just like they compressed the sun about a month ago.
Oh, that's interesting. Do tell.
Well, about a month ago, there was a fissure across the top third of the sun. And some people were saying, what is that? I said, that's a fissure. And I said, look for a saturation of EMVs in a day or two. And there was. And I told some people, I said, they're compressing the sun. They're making it stable because a star that isn't managed can be very unstable. And by compressing it, they keep it from coming apart.
So we understand a little bit more about what they perform on a physical layer. Can we now move to what these EMVs represent on a spiritual level? Because I believe, as your research has brought out, and as you know personally, there's a higher intelligence involved in the functioning of the EMVs, and in fact, they have a connection to us and our own eternal state.
Well, we are only human beings when we're in this mortal coil. We have been other beings from elsewhere. There is a growing spirit number, but it's not as growing as you might think. And when at death, when you are a member of any civilization that has not itself ascended to a spiritual level of technology, but let's say like ours, or like most of the, just about all of the extended community as of now, when an individual dies, his mind and soul combine and form the spirit. And this is immortal. And not only is it immortal, it is a self-evolving process. And in that moment, everything that was ever experienced, everything that was ever learned by perhaps even being in the EMVs is given, is gained. And that spirit may travel somewhat or go where it desires, but generally it will end up in a star to get the energy that will bring it about at the same level of energy that the EMVs are. It'll go in an EMV and in a chamber with other spirits. And it will bathe in knowledge, feeling, experience of all of them. And it's the most wondrous thing. Even to go in a star and bathe that energy up is like having been a victim of a very cold and very hard winter and just not being able to get warm, and then suddenly you're laying on the beach soaking up that vitamin D. And that's what it's like. It's wonderful. I mean, there's nothing to the spirit, there is nothing that's going to come but wonderful warmth and love and knowledge. And the more you know, the richer all of these experiences are. It's never ending. The ability to contain all this is just a given. And it's the most wonderful thing. Most people that go into the chambers don't ever want to come out. But if they do, and I stress this because I've had people misrepresent me about this and saying, well, I just don't believe you get locked up in an EMV, that's what all this is about. No. If you're an EMV, you're throughout the universe. You're throughout the universe, and not the galaxy, not solar systems. You're throughout the universe. You have attained. You have arrived. And what is higher than us, we don't know. We don't know, but we know there's something there because it has provided these wonders. But that there is always something above you, something out of reach. There's a reason for that too. That's part of the design. If you can feel the hand of God, but you can't see the face, the wisdom in that is, it lends to the peace that comes about, that enables you to have an extended community and no war and no aggression. There are no serial killers, no pedophiles, nothing like that, because the sources for those kind of aberrances are the injustice and the elitist privileges that are taken at the expense of so many that breed this sort of thing. And if you don't have those, if you don't have children being mistreated when they're very young, if you don't have people exploited, and the exploiters being able to get away with it because of corrupt judges and payoffs, all this goes away. And then you begin to realize how ridiculous it ever was to put up with any of it.
And I guess in one sense what you're talking about in terms of us going into this state where we become part of, I would think of it probably less as a collective, but more as a juncture of spiritual beings who are unified in a field, if I can use that term. I'm trying to picture this. It fits in somewhat with ancient Eastern philosophies and religions in terms of transmigration of the soul, which I think has been lost in the westernized religious structures. And I think we've lost some of the majesty as well of even what little we have left of, some of the great beings who have visited us over time in terms of understanding eternality and what that is, emergence back into a God force. The other side of it, and I wanted to ask you this, and you actually kind of touched on it, the source of evil on planet Earth, because you described all the conditions and we've talked about them. I think we're very fond of, complaining about the evil on planet Earth. In your mind, is this something that we have to go through in order to attain to another level in the spirit? Is that the reason why we experience this corruption?
No, it's not part of the growth process,
okay.
And it's needless. But I'll tell you that from what I've seen, experienced, and been able to communicate, what we've seen on this planet, for all its excesses, has produced some of the most interesting music, art, literature, things that are missing from cultures and civilizations that are so removed from their savage state. This is a theater. This is, they can be quick to condemn on one hand, but when they sit back and they realize that you can't find a justification for imposing suffering on others, nonetheless, the will comes forth, and the strength of the desire to survive, protect your children, all of these things have been forgotten by these cultures. Then now they are they're relearning a valuable lesson, and we're teaching them. And now that doesn't mean that we're out of the fire. We are in the fire, and the outcome is not determined, but we need to take heart. And part of that is to realize, not to be sold that we're going to lose everything here, because we're not. This is just a stage of our existence, and probably the most challenged and most disruptive of all that we'll ever go through. But it would be wonderful, and I would be extremely joyous to see this planet and its people and lineage survive. But it's not going to be a cakewalk. And we have to make up our minds. And if we can do it in a bloodless manner, but if we can't, we have to do what we have to do. And I have never wanted to harm another human being. I've been angry like anyone else, but I am not guided by violence. But I will guarantee you I will be part and parcel of anything to keep this depopulation program from coming about. And there are the EMVs not going to continue to provide this planet with what it needs once that starts. And so I appeal to the powers that be, their captains and their lieutenants, to change the course and to change it now. And no more Fukushimas, no more unnatural storms. Yeah, no more. Turn around, go the other way, save yourself the consequences, because you're at risk as much as anyone. This is your home. Treat it like that, because You're not going to destroy people on this planet and go elsewhere and find subterfuge. You go in the holes in the ground and you'll die there like rats. And that's what I have to say.
You know, James, you expressed something in that really touched me. One of the things that I've noticed in kindred spirits, and it's something that I see in myself, that I aspire to, and it comes from someplace that's, I believe, outside me, is the dislike to do harm to other beings. If I look back on my life, it's a single thing that I always purposed, even as a child. To me, it was completely foreign to do violence to another person or to have it done to me or people around me. And yet at the same time, I think you and I, because we've talked a little bit, have encountered a world that seems to us hostile, that we live in a world of predators, that we live in a world of violence, that we live in a world where parasitic beings attempt on a daily basis to eradicate the very source of the joy that I think these off-planeters see as well in the human race, this ability to create something beautiful out of profound sorrow, out of war, out of deprivation. And I guess, you know, what you just issued as your edict to those out there who are part of the controlling oligarchy goes to the heart of this. As people wake up, they have to begin to grasp that essential element of their own humanity and nurture it and realize that it is that will to not do violence, but to see humanity transcend this current period that's kind of a hallmark of that consciousness, if you will.
It is a very limited way of thinking that allows a conscionable person to fall in line and to support these wars. There are no wars on this planet right now that are not wars of aggression.
Absolutely.
We have so many alternatives that the powers that be have oppressed, suppressed, diverted us away from, and it's time to draw them up. It is time to do whatever we have to do to change all of this and to put these people on notice, to say this is no longer business as usual. You have denied the laws of nature, of economics, of human decency, philosophical values, moral values, religious teachings, spiritual teachings. You've denied all of this, and we've sat there and we've watched you. We know what you're doing, and we see the results in our children. Our children are lessened by it.
Yes.
They go to school and they're not given the truth. They know that. These children today are wiser and smarter than we were. And we look upon them because they can't do arithmetic as well as we could, or they don't know how to diagram a sentence as well as we did, because we were taught and they aren't.
Yeah.
They are given a bunch of crap. And I knew that the first time I looked at one of these syllabuses, that a friend of mine who is very talented, who would have been a great teacher if he had been allowed to be.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't be a great teacher and follow the syllabus. You can't communicate to a child the love of poetry, of literature, with a stinking damn syllabus. It has to come from the feelings and emotions and the creativity that is engendered in the teacher himself or herself. And we have so many people like that that are not in teaching that would be if there wasn't a stinking syllabus.
I know some of them, yes.
Yeah, we all do. We all do. There isn't a person here that's over 21 years old that doesn't know somebody that's not teaching that should be. And it's not the money. It's the fact that they don't want to be part of the butchery of these young minds. And that's what they're being whenever they follow the syllabus, because the syllabus is not educating. The syllabus is making these young kids less creative just to be compliant.
Machines. They're basically machines of the state. They're no longer educated to be higher beings who are creative, who are loving, who pursue knowledge for the sake of knowledge, for the sake of understanding the world around them. They are basically caged in a mental prison created by their own lack of understanding. And,
That's right.
it's funny because it kind of stirs in me an old scripture, my people perish for lack of knowledge, and that's exactly what has happened to humanity.
And not far from that passage is one, in all you're getting, get knowledge.
Absolutely. Solomon.
And, oh yes, there are so many things. I grew up on the parables. In fact, my grandmother was a fundamentalist, and when my mother would leave me with my grandmother, she'd leave me a dime to go to the store, to go to the show on Saturday. And my grandmother would say, "That's the devil's whatever.
Yeah,
you're not going until you memorize a book in the Bible."
Yes.
And so I'd memorize a book in the Bible, and not verses, a book. And so Grandma would say, "Give me Deuteronomy." Well, what chapter in Deuteronomy and what verse, Grandma?
But you know something? In all of that, I think there's a different sense that we have in terms of what, later scriptures had to say about the letter of the law kills, but the spirit of the law. I mean, we have that placed within us. Within each one of us is a spark of that. And it doesn't have anything to do with religion. It has to do with the basic decency of who we are, what we've really talked about here in the last 10 minutes. James, we've covered a wide scope. I want to come back to EMVs for a moment, and maybe in a very short kind of shrift here, you can give us a little bit of the physics behind this, because one of the things that I don't think most people understand is that our grasp of how our universe operates, we're so stunted in knowledge. But it appears to me, in talking to you, that there's some fascinating physics involved with the EMVs, the exchanges of energy between magnetism and electrical energy, and some things that I don't think we've ever understood or been taught about how the solar system, the galaxy, the universe operates. Can you kind of maybe just give us a breakdown of that a little bit?
I think that one of the best ways of looking at the universe is you have a huge mind, and this mind has acquired the ability to represent itself in different forms throughout space. And as it does, it changes, because one of its first thoughts is variation, because it hates redundance. And as one variation plays out, another takes up, and no two thoughts are duplicated. And it expands outward and then enjoys different manifestations of awareness and consciousness through what it creates, until it gets to the point where it finds a pattern. And once it finds this pattern, then its intention is to learn how to express it with greater variation in the greatest economy of space. And, this is a cosmology in itself. And if you look in some of the more elegant cosmologies on the planet, whether it's Buddhist or Hindu or Christian or Greek, you see this represented the same way, but given a personality. Earthbound humans tend to want to give things personalities. We have the god of thunder or goddess of the moon and things like that. All of these are expressed in the same way, basically, and that is that there's a persona or cognizance behind it, and that even the elements are obedient to it. We have the host that controls the wind. We have the host that controls water. We have the host that controls the earth, and we represent that differently. And if we're pagans, we represent it with a tarot deck. And if we're Norse, we represent it in the way we bury our dead. If we realized how much alike we were, even some of the bloodlust rites that we see that have been practiced among people we find very untenable, in comparison to ourselves, because we don't kill civilians and we don't bomb cities full of civilians. We never developed or thought about phosphorus bombs, or worse, we would never develop a hydrogen bomb. I mean, that would be bloodletting, wouldn't it? And that's what the Mayans did, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, if we only knew. If we only looked at ourselves when we're paralleling ourselves with other people in comparison, when we're doing that, if we really, really factored in the reality of our situation and what we've allowed to be created in our name, we wouldn't use two words. One of them is savage, and the other is enlightened.
The two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
I guess this is why as well, just based on what you expounded there, we kind of find it has eluded us to come up with unified field theories. And, like, for instance, you look at Einstein's work, and as brilliant as he was, the later generations of scientists began to poke holes into Einstein's theories. Einstein rejected, the basic premise of quantum physics, which now is somewhat the leading edge, although I think there's other things beyond it in our current understanding, the connection between our physics and our consciousness. And that kind of brings me into the topic that I think I really wanted to touch base with you on, because you address it in a way I've not heard before. The split consciousness versus the unified consciousness of the human.
Our ancestors had unified consciousness. They were victimized by a circumstance and a situation, and that didn't come out well. In the upheaval, they lost a lot of the stability that they had had for centuries taken for granted. So when they were misplaced, they never erected the time-proven, and they allowed a caste system to develop, which hadn't been done for thousands of years. That was a mistake. That was a very bad mistake, because when the split consciousness came about, it was temporary, or could have been temporary, and could have been corrected immediately, but this elitist caste found a way in which to exploit it. And the situation in which this occurred actually had something to do when the moon was placed in orbit around the Earth. There were things that were occurring. The original respirant for humans was a mixture of gases in which helium played a large part, because helium is a more efficient respirant than oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
And so losing that, plus having a vacillating gravity wave. And I can explain gravity wave to you if you think we have time.
I believe, well, let's go there, because frankly, I have to this day failed to understand gravity at a concrete level.
All right. Gravity is more than a body asserting a force which is proportionate to its size and density. It's more than that. It's also gravity of a body in space has another element rather than the physical dimensions, and that is its place among the neighboring astral bodies around it, and the configuration that those astral bodies conform to with respect to its star. And also, going beyond that, other systems that may be located in a fairly close proximity relatively. In our case, we are out far removed from other systems. Not all solar systems are like that. Most of them have a little bit more in proximity with them.
Mm-hmm.
But Earth is kind of an outpost system, our solar system. So our gravity wave is mostly determined almost exclusively by the planets and where we are in that configuration with the sun, and also our moon. And our moon is disproportionately large. It's larger than it should be to have the stable configuration. So there are engines that are set in the moon and on Earth which create an adjustment to change the gravity between the Earth and Moon to keep the Moon in the orbit that it's in, because it has a tendency, being a disproportionate size, being too large, to want to wander out or to come in. And so these adjustments have to be made, and they vacillate our gravity wave. So our gravity wave signature vacillates, can't hold helium, so our respirant isn't as rich or as good for us. And we also have this vacillating gravity wave, and it, along with the way that our technology observes certain characteristics, perpetuates the split consciousness, or at least keeps it from any evolutionary attempt to mend. It's not natural.
So you're saying that the split consciousness is a physiological reaction to our vacillating gravitation?
Yes, it is. It was a temporary reaction, but it was opportunized by the powers that be at the time. And when the adjustments came, the people that helped us do this were those that were living below the crust or below the surface of Mars. And they were in the process of aspiring to a different manifestation, spiritual technology. And they could have changed this, but they gave directions, and they gave control of these machines to the people, and they weren't used. They didn't make the final adjustment because they felt like they could control the population better. They opportunized them. And so that state existed, and that's one reason, because of the split consciousness, where you have the subconscious at warfare with the conscious mind constantly. Yes. You are a house divided. And that's what the biblical connotation is all about. You are a house divided. And because of that, for a long time, E.T. believed that you were impaired, that you were flawed, and I did too. But this is the last go-around, and I want to see, there is greater appreciation for things that have cropped up, qualities that have cropped up. And today, this time around, people want to see this, not just me, but there are ETs that want to see this succeed. They want to see what comes of it. After all, the whole thing is about variation, about finding a new fire to forge a spirit out of. That's basically what it's all about. It's always been that.
Yeah, there's almost like a novelty concept in terms of the universe and our interaction with it. We are somewhat unique. We're somewhat flawed, and yet at the same time, that flaw is something that has made us unique and somewhat interesting to other beings.
Oh, yes. More interesting than you will ever know. This is...
this is a sense I have. The sense I have is that the off-worlders are very interested in us, and not in a negative way, but they're almost in awe of what we still are, but even more so what we would become once we got past this current plateau.
I think that there is an element of fear, or as I've said, awe, in what they see here. It's like raw energy. I mean, you look at something that on the face of it you take for granted is just savage and primitive, but if you look deeper, you see a beautiful cultural element. You see people that love with a greater intensity, hate with a greater intensity, do everything with a greater intensity, and it wakes you up. You have let your success make you indolent, and you never realized it until suddenly you're just overwhelmed by the power of these people. And that's what has been brought to A.T. I mean, they thought that they were saviors, and they came to be saviors, and suddenly they're in awe and mystified. And, I got an E.T. one time to read Moby Dick, and he cried. Absolutely cried. He said, "These people can do this?" And I said, "Yeah." Yeah.
Wow. That's a whole other conversation in itself, one that hopefully you and I shall have. Question that kind of popped up to me, and maybe two. How are the EMVs currently interacting with Earth energetics? Are they not interacting with us in a manner that is in some way sustaining us?
They're holding your planet together. That operation in Utah is about that. They're cushioning the plate tectonics. They've used H.A.A.R.P to try to destabilize the New Madrid, and it's not working. You can thank the EMV's operation in Utah for that.
Yes, I'm well aware of the attempts to destabilize at those particular points the New Madrid, the Gulf of Mexico, Deep Horizon, to me, was a pretty signature event of what they were trying to do as well to destabilize the tectonics.
Yeah, well, that's what that northern hole was all about. They had, before the explosions, which were very suspicious, before the explosions, they had already started another well to the south that they didn't want anybody to know about, and they kept anybody from looking down that way. But they kept going with that other one, too. They had a bad hole, and they figured out a way of recovering money and making money with it by being able to know exactly when the disaster they intentionally caused took place. That permitted them to go on the market and buy up shares and sell shares.
Yes.
With that knowledge, it's like insider information.
Well, it's just like what they did with 9/11.
Yeah.
And the airline stocks that were traded very rapidly prior to September 11th, 2001.
Happened with the JFK assassination, too.
Oh, really?
There was a company that made $800 million that week following the assassination. There was a broker that had just gone crazy. He had hundreds of millions of dollars of portfolios, and he started buying up all these contracts short. And so this corporation, its people, started buying them long. Oh. And they would buy almost inside information, knowing what contracts were being bought up short, and then they would buy long. And so whenever the assassination took place, the scandal of that happened, and it drove the commodities market down 40 points in one day. And that was enough that the put-in calls were so heavy, those people had to forfeit their contracts, and those people that bought long picked them up in all the securities that they were based on. $800 million worth.
That was a lot of money in 1963.
All went into the hands of one corporation. Oddly enough, the same corporation that had pioneered mind control called RCID, which might have been used on Ruby, for one.
These guys never changed their tactics a whole lot. They know how to be evil and make money at the same time.
Yeah, well, they're trilateralists. I mean not just in terms of the Trilateral Commission. Right. They worship invariably. They worship Lucifer. They make no bones about that. And Lucifer has a reptilian aspect, that is a triune brain. That's the triangle. And so, therefore, they have to have three purposes with every conspiracy. Three purposes. Or three levels of three purposes, or whatever. The more interdimensional that becomes, the more bizarre. And they love the bizarre. And so, yeah, you know, if I know enough, I can tell you what their three purposes.
Well, thank you for that, because that's the first time anybody's explained that to me at that level. Very.
Now, the split consciousness is bicameral, or duality. The reptilian is triune. They have three brains. And so these people that want to blame it all on reptiles, you know, it isn't reptiles. I've stood up for reptiles because I know some cold-blooded people, and they're nice people, and I don't want them to get a bad rap. They've been staying away from Earth because of the sorry attitude towards that reptiles here. You know, oh, that was in the Garden of Eden, and that turned to Eve, and yeah, sure.
Well, those are all distortions, and I think those of us who have inquired into these things realize that. James, 2012, and I have just kind of a lightning round thing. Are we entering the galactic center, as many have asserted?
Well, that's a way of saying it. I mean, everything gets closer to something, but is it causal? The biggest issue here is a moral one. It's not technology, It's not science, it's moral. Do the right thing, everything will come out all right.
And are we a binary system?
You're about to be, if you're not careful. A binary system has two suns.
Okay.
Arthur C. Clarke was.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about.
I do know what you're talking about. Yes. Yes. It would the 2010 scenario that was outlined by Clarke.
Well, these people are amazing. You can go into science fiction, really good science fiction, like his, and you can find so many. Some people would find them points of contention. I find them points of assonance, where things come together and begin to harmonize so well they almost chime. And that's what you get with Arthur Clarke, and there are a couple more.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at Herbert, when he wrote Dune,
yeah.
I mean, I was overwhelmed when I read Dune.
This is the stuff I grew up on, yes.
Oh, yeah, I was overwhelmed when I read it because remember the worm in Dune? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's so much like an EMV. I just almost fell over.
I said, amazing.
They know. They have had enough tap on the shoulder from their past, or from, I should say, deep past.
Mm-hmm.
And I had always wanted, I was hoping and praying that he would live to see more come out about the EMVs. But we look at these people that create these wonderful stories, and sometimes they're so wonderful, you want them to be true whether they are or not. And I say this about this cosmology, which is around the EMVs. The more you know about it, the more you will want it to be true. Whether you ever believe it or not, you'll want it to be true, and that's something in itself.
Well, I think in a way, for people like us and people like me who grew up in the generation fed on that literature, there was an aspect to that was mythological, and it becomes almost self-fulfilling. I mean, here I am, 40 years later, and we're having a conversation about things that I read when I was a child. And I guess the desire that planted was a lifelong pursuit towards something that I think we touched on very lightly in this show, and that is unified consciousness. And maybe in these last minutes, James, help me to understand what it is we as individuals can do to aspire to a unified consciousness and to bring along with us those who have that same desire.
Well, you can look at it this way. We're all driving a school bus, and the sane of us want to drive that school bus to wonderful things, and the insane of us want to drive it to destruction.
So this is intention.
Intention and manifestation go hand in hand.
I can't think of any way I'd rather close this interview than with that thought. We'll just let that hover out there as a seed for those who are going to hear this show, and I think it's probably a springboard for some future conversations as well. James, I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank you for doing what you do, and for all of those who are supporting you. I want to thank our friend, Patrice, who helped to kind of put us together and connect us in a way and encourage me to have you on. He was instrumental in this show. He was instrumental in introducing me to, I think, some kindred spirits along the way. So, James,
very
thanks.
Talented young man.
Yes, absolutely. And to Tours as well for the website, and those who are working on the video work, the video side of the website, and continuing to get this message out. This is grassroots. People like James come on shows like this, and we do shows like this because we're what's left of truth in media. There is no truth in mass media. And to you, the listener, the one thing that I've always asked listeners who write to me is, pass this on. Tell other people. This is gadflies in action. We don't have mass media. What we have right now is the ability to use this internet to get out a word that is crucial and timely for humanity on planet Earth. Any last comments, James, before we close out here?
I just want to end it on that note.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
My guest for this show, James Horak. I'm Randy Maugans. This is Off Planet Radio. The truth is out there. It's inside you. Begin looking for it.